All right, welcome back to Wisdom Teachings. What is he doing sitting on the job? I'm getting paid to stand, not sit down. Well, we're changing it up a little bit. This is one of those rare and wonderful cases where I get dragged down into the pit. And just like in the Roman Colosseum, the lions have been set loose. And this guy right here said he intends to win. Okay, we're going to have victory in this episode. We don't just want to give you entertainment. Forget that. Disclosure, truth, ascension, full victory. Without further ado, we're going to hit the ground running. So, contestant number one, tell us your name and what is your question, and I will see if you can win this contest.
Excellent. My name is Tucker, and my question centers around synchronicity.
Okay.
I've had some amazing synchronicities go on in my lifetime, stuff that's opened me up and made me travel to certain energy paths, and I've discovered more along the way. And I'm fascinated with some of your books, and I want to know, what is your biggest act and moment of synchronicity, and then some other current ones, if you can round out for color.
Good question, Tucker. Thank you. To try to define what is the biggest synchronicity that I've ever had, that's an interesting one. I did describe this on my website, and I think I've got the answer, and that is, before I experienced the full angelic telepathic contact in November 1996 that led to these readings I was doing where I'd be dictating things into a tape recorder. I wouldn't really know what I was saying. There'd be a stack of cassettes on my desk, and they'd be like a month old when I dictated them. And then I would sit down and I would start transcribing them, and over again, dozens and dozens and dozens of. So time was irrelevant. But there were a lot of very curious synchronicities that built up to this contact that kind of paved the way for it. I was living in New Paltz, which is a little town in upstate New York, and I would often shop at a particular grocery store called Robin's Food Warehouse off of Route 32. And I sometimes would go in there with only $10 to spend, because I was very poor, and I would randomly throw things in the bag, kind of knowing approximately what I could get. I'd toss in some beans into a bag, some rice. I was doing the macrobiotic diet, so I'd do rice and azuki beans, right? But I wouldn't really weigh them or anything. And I'd get up to the register, and more than once, there would be like a 111 in the pounds of the rice, right? Like 1.11. And then the price would be $9.99. And I didn't do it consciously. So this happened. At the store, I'd get numerical synchronicities in the price tag, and I'd actually save them. Then on the way home, I was noticing that there was a particular intersection that I would reach where I would get odometer synchronicities. And it was always the same intersection. And there's like a farmhouse over on the left and a grain silo, rolling fields of wheat, cows. This place that's off the beaten path in New Paltz in the middle of nowhere. And I've just had these cash register synchronicities in the store. Then I go to this intersection and I got like 888 on my odometer. So there was one time where I had the cash register synchronicity again. I get in the car, I drive to this particular location, and I have an alignment. I think it was all fours. It was like 4 4s on my odometer. And I had a 555 on the clock at the same. I think it was all fours. It was like 4 4s on my odometer. And I had a 555 on the clock at the same exact time. And I'm literally going, okay, is this like where the UFO is coming down and I'm going to get picked up? But I was too scared. I actually thought maybe if I drive out here at night that something's going to happen. But it freaked me out and I did not want to do it. But those experiences sort of paved the way for my contact, which happened later. It was very interesting. So as far as the recent past with synchronicities, that kind of stuff is happening more and more, where I get odometer alignments in conjunction with clock alignments. I've been getting lots of them, as you probably have seen, because I can tell you read my website, all the time with my hit counter. Like I'll go in to just do an edit on my article, and then it's like 55555 or something like that. I think the real value of synchronicity, people always say, well, what do the numbers mean? You know, how do I interpret? And actually, we had a case in the cafeteria today. The lady at the register had been carrying out some glass that had come out of the dishwasher. And it broke in her hands, and now she's bleeding, and had to go clean it up and get the bandage on it and everything, go to the first aid area. She didn't get cut that bad, thankfully. But she's like, well, what do you think it means? And I said, okay, here's what I always do. Anytime I get a synchronicity, I say, what was the thought I was having right before the synchronicity takes place? And if it's a bad synchronicity, like a bloody cut, then it's telling me that the thought I had was negative and that I need to avoid that type of thinking. If it's a positive synchronicity, like 11:11, then it's telling me you're on the right track spiritually, you're in the right place, keep going. So that's how I encourage people to use synchronicity as a form of spiritual guidance for or whatever it is. It could be a variety of things, and you can encode synchronicity too. Like I had one lady who believed that when she found a penny on the ground, that was her synchronicity. She'd find them in the most auspicious places and times. So you can tell the universe that you accept a certain thing. The Native Americans, they have a whole system for different animals, and if you see an animal, that's what it means. That's shamanism, basic shamanism. So I like the numerical stuff because we're surrounded by numbers all the time, and they pop out at you, and you start noticing license plates, your odometer, clocks, hit counters, cash register tapes, all this kind of stuff. What were you thinking about right before it happened? So get into the habit of just remembering what you were thinking, and then that synchronicity is telling you something about your thought. And another one of the cool ones is, let's say you're looking for 333 on the clock, but then you get 332, and you're like, damn it, it's 1 minute off. That I've always interpreted as being you're really close, you're just not quite there yet, but you're on the right track, you just got to push a little harder. And I've used that synchronicity for many years to show me what is in my highest and best good, and that's how I use it. All right, I think he shoots, he scores. Okay, next, tell us your name, and let's see if you can tickle my brain.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kate, and my question is, I've seen that the Cabal, the term, is replacing the Illuminati term as sort of a blanket organization of global elite. I'm wondering why that is, what's the relationship, and if you have any more information about how this term is now coming to light.
Okay. This is actually kind of funny. I have this guy who writes me under a pseudonym, and he's used a few different ones over time. I probably shouldn't say what the pseudonyms are, but he has been claiming to be an Illuminati insider. And he has given me some pretty interesting stuff. I've never spoken to him on the phone. I've never seen him in person that I'm aware of. He might have come to my event, but he didn't introduce himself. But he would always get all upset if I wrote an article and I called it the Illuminati. And he said, David, not everybody that calls themselves Illuminati is evil. And so what I started to realize is that the term is, first of all, very fringe. We have a situation in which people have been conditioned through media indoctrination, brainwashing for 4 generations now to see conspiracy theory as this evil thing that automatically makes you a crank and a crackpot and a kook. So the term Illuminati has become very emotionally charged as it is immediately associated with guys like in the movie Beautiful Mind, where you got all this stuff on your wall and all these pieces of string connecting. It's all connected, man, you know. And the joke that you see people make fun of conspiracy theorists online is, and you've seen Stephen Colbert do this a bunch of times, that everything is connected to everything else. So that's how they try to poke at us. So the term Illuminati absolutely is a relevant term. But it does appear that there are some groups that are actually trying to defeat negativity on Earth who want to use the word Illuminati. And I've said, guys, you know, you really ought to think about rebranding. Let's get your marketing department on the phone here and let's come up with a new name, because Illuminati isn't working for me anymore. So the fact that this guy would write me these emails, the fact that he said there are benevolent groups that are still using that term despite the fact that this guy would write me these emails, the fact that he said there are benevolent groups that are still using that term, despite what I would say, think of something else, and the conspiracy theory angle, we decided that it was better to use a less dramatic, more emotionally neutral term. And it was a conscious decision that we made a few years ago. And when I say we, I mean folks like myself, Benjamin Fulford, a couple of my other insiders. We said, let's give it a less scary sounding, less satanic sounding name, because a lot of people associate Illuminati with the all-seeing eye. And when Corey Goode came into the fray and we started to talk to various alliance groups, we have the Secret Space Program Alliance, we have the Earth Alliance groups. One of the things the Secret Space Program Alliance told us is, look, we don't want you guys giving this group this towering occult significance. We don't want you talking about them as if they're some supernatural entity. It's just a crime family. It's just another mafia. So they wanted us to call it quasi-governmental crime syndicates. Doesn't really flow off the tongue very well. Okay, cabal. That's kind of how that came around. Was there anything else that you asked me that I didn't quite touch on, or? There was a second part to your question. So what was the second part?
Maybe, is there a relationship between the two? Is the Illuminati a part or under the cabal in some way?
Yeah. So bear in mind that these terms that we're using, like Illuminati or cabal, they are nothing but shorthand. So you'll hear Corey a lot of times say cabal groups. There are a number of factions, and then there's factions within factions. So it's almost like the word cabal or the word Illuminati is like a file folder that has a little word for the file. It's cabal, and you start flipping through that, and it's like, oh, there's this, and there's this, and there's this. There's Islamic factions. There's 5 different political factions in China. There's factions of what we would call the Illuminati that are very steeped in Celtic, that are very steeped in Egyptian, that are very steeped in Sumerian. There's the Sufism, which is sort of like an Islamic Illuminati, but in the Western world with white people. The Shriners would be those guys with the fezzes, right? So they drive a little go-kart in the parade, Oh, they're so threatening. So the point is, everybody would like to simplify the subject. It's not simple. There were 3 factions just in the CIA. There was the old CIA, the new CIA, and then the breakaway CIA. The old CIA was sort of more like the British Rothschild group. The new CIA was sort of the Rockefeller-Bush cartel. Then the breakaway says, to heck with both of you guys, I'm going to do my own thing, and then they might work with either side. But even those old 3 factions don't account for the alliance, which now apparently has majority control of the CIA. So even within countries, people like to say, well, which country's in the cabal? Is Britain a cabal country? Yeah, but there's a significant amount of alliance activity in Britain. Their media has been way more open than ours in America, with things like describing Prince Andrew and his involvement in pedophilia. That was publicly disclosed. Top politicians, top media celebrities like Jimmy Savile, who was the host of these shows on BBC for 30, 40 years, a very serial criminal in sex crimes. So it is all changing, and these terms are easy. Because if anybody starts talking, then they all go down together. So they would fight with each other, they'd compete over who gets to be top dog, but ultimately they did not want ever to have this disclosed to the public, because then the whole game is up. But that is where the alliance comes in, and that's where now we're actually getting the truth. So thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay, next, give us your name, and let's see if you can stump the whiz.
All right, my name is Daniel. So if the universe vibrates with these oscillating waves of sound,
Okay.
what's the relationship between sound and photons, and thus light to the kind of origin of the multiverse?
Okay, good question. And I think we've exposed a fundamental misunderstanding, which is sound is actually related to what vibrations create the universe and create matter. But the universe itself is not created by sound per se. Sound is a phenomenon that is a result of a vibration of air at the atmospheric pressure that we have on Earth. And that air vibrates at a certain number of frequencies per second, cycles per second. And it's a very interesting fact that the numbers that come out of the sounds that sound good to our ears happen to also be the numbers that have the most factors, the most different ways they can be chopped up evenly into separate chunks. So like 360 is going to sound really good. You vibrate air 360 cycles per second, it's going to sound like one of the white keys in the piano. It's a tone. But you can divide 360 up in all different ways. It's 3 units of 120 as one example. You can throw a bunch of 9s in there. You can throw a bunch of 6s in there. It all adds up. So that's sort of the idea of harmonics where you can throw a bunch of 9s in there. You can throw a bunch of 6s in there. It all adds up. So that's sort of the idea of harmonics where the more ways you can divide up a number evenly, the more vibration is in the number. So sacred science like gematria, where they put these numbers into Bible passages, that is a science of vibration in number. The number encodes vibration. So what is going on at the universal level that you were describing? What it appears is happening is that instead of air being the medium that is vibrating, we have some energetic substance which, depending on how it behaves, could be seen in some ways as a solid and in some ways as a fluid. The fluid is where things really get interesting, because in a fluid we can vibrate it with sound, and although you can't really see sound in just straight empty fluid, you very much see it when you put particles in the fluid. And this is what I've talked about on my shows, which you obviously have seen, because your question clearly shows you've been doing your homework.
A little bit.
So if you put sand particles in that water and then you vibrate it, all of a sudden the vibration becomes visible and it turns into sacred geometry. So one of the big lost secrets of ancient wisdom teachings is that geometry is vibration. Geometry is a visual representation, a structural manifestation of vibration. Now, all of the models that I've been putting forth in wisdom teachings in the last, say, 30 episodes or so, maybe more, are all describing the different ways in which this vibration manifests as geometry that appears in very measurable things related to the basis of energy, the basis of matter, galactic energy fields in the solar system, energy fields on Earth, that's stuff we're getting up to, the function of proteins, the function of DNA, it's all based on this geometry. So it appears that there are these waves moving through the universe, and whatever that medium is, it's not really air, but it's some kind of fluid-like medium, and they're always in a state of vibration. So much like right now, as we're talking, we're surrounded by television signals, radio frequencies, Wi-Fi, but we can't descramble it. These waves are around us, but they need to be tuned in order to be something that we can appreciate. So the tuning comes into what we call shape power. The shape of the pyramid is a natural funnel out of stone in which it captures these waves and it starts making them spin, because it's like a fluid that spins inside the pyramid. Hence the term pyramid, pyramid, fire in the middle, means there's some kind of glowing light in the middle. Well, you don't see it with your eyes, but people that are esoteric priests trained in these mystery schools, they're going to see light inside the pyramid. So the vibrational geometry is an intelligent energy. It is a conscious healing energy. When you concentrate that energy into one area, you get profound healing effects. So the Russian studies on the pyramids have shown that you can get rid of cancer, diabetes, all known diseases, mental health problems. You get more rainfall, you get a decrease in thunderstorms, severe hurricanes, that kind of stuff, severe earthquakes, severe volcanic activity. It all gets calmed down by the presence of these also have some curious components when we look at the interplay of sound and light. And this gets into one of the other parts of your question. What is that relationship? Well, we do know some very interesting things, and this was found to me in a book, and I'm trying to remember the full title. It had mathematics in the title, which for me was fine. I'm not scared of that. The guy's name was Dale Pond. And I got to meet him at an event at the University for Science and Philosophy, USP, back in 2000. I got to talk to him personally. And Dale Pond found out that if you compare the ratios, the vibrational ratios between the white keys on the piano, and you look at the mathematical relationships that they have to one another, and then you expand those ratios many, many times over, the exact same mathematical relationships hold true between the 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7 basic colors of the rainbow. So what am I saying? You have the solfeggio scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Do and do is an octave, right? It's double. So if you're typical, the German Nazi A of concert 440 that everybody's so upset about, oh, it's got to be 432, man, come on, 432. Okay, let's just go with 440 for now. I'm not a Nazi, but I'm just going to use it. If you got 440, then you go to the octave, now you're at 880. It's double the same number. So you have these 7 intervals before you go back to the same note. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 440, 880. So you got these 7 intervals. Well, color is actually measured as an electromagnetic wavelength. We know that the electromagnetic spectrum is a lot wider than the visible light, actually measured as an electromagnetic wavelength. We know that the electromagnetic spectrum is a lot wider than the visible light. Visible light's like this little bitty thing in the electromagnetic spectrum, and you got ultraviolet and you got infrared, and you push it out, and now we don't see it with our eyes. We only interpret a small slice of the electromagnetic spectrum as visual information. But yet, for some reason, we know that if you take white light and hit it through a prism, you only get 7 colors come out as a rainbow. And the rainbow shows up naturally when there's rain. So there's some sort of principle, and this is well known to all science, as of course we know, that white light is a composite of these 7 colors merged. So when you start to differentiate those colors, you can measure their exact electromagnetic wavelengths. And if you look at the numerical ratios that those 7 colors have to each other, it's the same ratios as the 7 notes in the diatonic scale, which is really, really weird. It's an equivalence between sound and light that the ancient mystery schools were talking about all the time, but they didn't have anywhere near the technology to have measured the electromagnetic spectrum, so we think. So how did they know this? This suggests that geometry, sound, and light are different aspects of a greater universal energy. So even though we only see this little bitty slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, that's what we're supposed to be seeing, that we're calibrated to see something that is, again, I use this term all the time, it's a hologram, it's a fractal of the much greater universe in which there are 7 metaphysical colors, 7 colors of energy vibration that are not really the same as visible light because they cover the whole universe. But we have this sort of interest or clues, the trail of breadcrumbs that ultimately leads us back to some greater vibratory force, which is consciousness, that has made the universe, that has divided it into 7 planes of existence, which actually also correspond to the 7 chakras in the human body. Once again, red, orange, yellow, green, light blue, indigo, and violet. So apparently in Law of One philosophy, each of these correspond to a body that we have that has its own existence at its own level. And those bodies all kind of work independently from each other. So you could be hanging around in 4D, 5D, doing things out there and not be aware of it consciously here. But our goal is for the part of us that is the conscious self to ascend into these higher bodies while we are incarnate in a physical form. And that gets into the science of the Kundalini. The Hindu and Buddhist meditators, they're all about visualizing this energy coming up from the sacrum, rising through your spine, and then the height that it goes determines what chakra you've activated, what level of your bodies out there are now conscious to you. So as you meditate, you get into your indigo ray, for example, you're now experiencing the thoughts of that energy body, and you start to have the ability to do things like channeling or telekinesis or all this really cool stuff. And if you can really get that pineal gland fully open, if your Kundalini goes all the way up to here, then you have this stargate inside your brain that actually can create the halo, and you shoot through it. And that's your portal that allows you to travel anywhere you want in the universe. So if you really get into what the esoteric teachings say, it is believed that meditating on the sounds, such as toning them or hearing the music like Gregorian chant, meditating on and seeing the colors, believed that meditating on the sounds, such as toning them or hearing the music like Gregorian chant, meditating on and seeing the colors, and then also looking at the geometry, which could be like a colorful mandala, like the stained glass window in the Cathedral Chartres in France. There you have it. It's got everything. You got the people doing Gregorian chant, you got the sounds, you got the colors. It's an ascension chamber based on pyramid technology that the Knight Templars brought over from Egypt. So this science is really cool because you can, for example, tone the tones of the solfeggio scale, and then as you go through each one, you also visualize the color that is associated with it. And in fact, here in Boulder, there's Naropa Institute, and I applied to go to school there in 1995. I failed, I didn't get accepted, thank you. But when I was there and I was applying for this school, they have these color rooms, and each room you have a specific asana, specific yoga pose you're supposed to be in. And there's one room that's red, there's one room that's orange, yellow, there's a tone in the room. And you stay in that room and you meditate, and it's supposed to help activate the chakras. So ultimately, meditating on color, meditating on sound, toning, and meditating on sacred geometry are all things that help align you with your true identity. So those colors and those sounds become like a trail of breadcrumbs for your own ascension. Okay, so now we're going to go for the speed round. Tucker, you're up, buddy.
I've been fascinated with some of the stuff that came out when Edgar Mitchell kind of validated some of the things that there were myths and reports about ham radio operators recording some of the Apollo 11 transmissions. One of them actually said, or is alleged to say, they're here, they're alien spacecrafts on the edge of the crater and they're watching us. I'm paraphrasing, they're taken down by NASA based on copyright. They were never publicly broadcast. Mm-hmm. So that kind of disclosure has always been fascinating to me, that there's proof out there, that there's NASA involved, conspiracy energy behind why they wouldn't want that out there. Right. So my question kind of hinges on, why not? We've come this far. We're now in 2016, 2017. Why not give this energy back to us? Why not help us all open up more?
Apparently, at the time that we're taping this, we are on the threshold of some very significant breakthroughs in disclosure. And the cabal, up until now, has exercised the most rigid control over any disclosure of the extraterrestrial phenomena. And one of the reasons why I believe they're doing this, and there are many, is that they do not want to have their challenge of their alpha male status. They don't want to be shown to be ineffective in the presence of some extraterrestrial threat, if you will, or presence that basically is so much more advanced than them that they no longer get to be the guys that we look to when we're in trouble. Oh, please help us, we need your help. So if you have some force that's out there that's millions of years old civilization, that's had high technology for millions of years, they've been through all this weird stuff that we're going through on Earth now, they've solved the problem, and they're still around. Who would you want to listen to? Would you want to listen to the Grubberment, or would you want to listen to somebody who's been there, done that, and come out with their calling card to the higher realms? I think the answer is pretty obvious. So listen to the government, or would you want to listen to somebody who's been there, done that, and come out with their calling card to the higher realms? I think the answer is pretty obvious. So we're dealing with a negative governmental force that is now rapidly losing power, and I can't wait to see how disclosure unfolds. This year, 2017, should be one with major, major surprises in store for all of us.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, Kate, what do you got?
This is sort of a personal question. What do you think you would be doing in your life if you weren't pursuing the path that you are right now?
I would be at a car wash in a rubber suit, just like it says in the Jim Croce song. No, what would I be doing? You know, it's tough to say. My work is so much a part of my life that it would appear that I have been on this trajectory all along. I grew up in a musical family. It's possible that if I hadn't steered myself properly towards what I'm doing now, that I might have become a professional musician. I did minor in jazz in college. I was able to do some really flashy stuff on the drums. But I grew up in a family where my mother was trying to make money from music and my father was writing about music, and neither one of them could make a living at it. My father couldn't make a living writing about it. My mother could barely make a living performing professionally in wedding bands and doing piano teaching, that kind of stuff. What else could I be doing? When I got out of college, I had a bunch of jobs in human services. I majored in psychology, so it's possible that I might have gone into some kind of clinical therapy type of setting where I'd be giving people psychological counseling. That's what I went to school for. I did originally want to get a PhD in psychology, but then all this paranormal stuff kind of came in and kicked that out of the way. There's also any number of other directions I could go, but I'm just really glad that I'm on this, what appears to be my optimum life timeline. How many people can say that they are doing this much of what they really love and being able to influence that many people, where I get all these people coming up to me at conferences with tears in their eyes saying, your work means so much to me, it's changed my whole life forever. I can't thank you enough. You're the reason why I didn't kill myself. That happens a lot. So that's pretty awesome, and I respect that power, and I try to use it responsibly.
Thank you.
All right, hit me.
So kind of building off of what Tucker's last question, you talked about, you know, a more advanced race coming here that's been around for millions of years, and so they've been through what we've already been through. And so in our timeline, if having that advanced race come and benefit our race, if that's part of our timeline, is it possible that that civilization that's millions of years old was visited by an even more advanced race millions of years ago?
Interesting question. Yeah. When you get into the law of one, they use the term guardians a lot. And this is just a word in English that could be replaced with other words perhaps, but it's a word that carries an underlying archetypal feeling that seems to be pretty much consistent throughout the universe. What are guardians? Guardians represent ET groups that are very advanced, that guard developing groups to prevent them from being invaded, overthrown, turned into a slave planet, martial law. The guardians have to preserve free will, so they work behind the scenes. You don't necessarily know that they're out there. And that's a very important part of this law of one philosophy, is the preservation of free will. And I'm going to drop a Bible reference, but it applies to many other things as well. You read in the Bible Jesus making these strange analogies, and it's like, well, you know, if your faith is but the size of a grain of mustard seed, then it will grow into the largest tree in the garden. What the heck is he talking about? And there's all this kind of stuff. So Jesus and other masters will speak in symbolism, so that if you are not aware of what the message is, if your soul doesn't reach out to that message and grasp it, you're not going to get it. Dreams speak symbolically. Dreams do not just tell you what's going on. But I've been writing my dreams down now for 23 years. and I understand what they're telling me. People are really surprised by that. Like, well, I had a big discussion about this last night, and a friend of mine was saying, well, David, surely you got to have like maybe 25% of dreams that are just kind of random nonsense and you don't understand. I'm like, no, actually, it's very rare that I don't understand what a dream is saying. But it's always veiled in symbolism. So a dream, for example, just to give you a couple pointers, it will always be talking about you, but it will use other characters to describe parts of yourself. So if you have a negative character, a villain, then that villain represents some part of yourself that has gotten tangled up in negativity. If there's two characters coming into conflict, it ultimately represents a psychological conflict that you're facing in yourself. Whatever scenery is in your dream, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, those are things that have to do with yourself. So the dream preserves your free will in the sense that it slides these things in. It's all about you. It's all a big hall of... And as you awaken, you become aware of symbolism. You become aware of synchronicity. You become aware of the hidden, the unseen. And you start to exercise faith and will to reach out for guidance, to seek guidance consciously, to invoke synchronicity, to ask for messages to be given. And as those messages come in, you are now benefiting much more from these guardian ET races. And so we're told that every developing population has guardians. The roles, the people that do it will change, but the role and its function is very consistent, and everybody gets them. All right, are you guys satisfied? Do you feel like you've had a lot to eat here? Is it like you're going to walk away from the table with a full stomach? I think so. I think we're good. And that's all the time we have for, so we have to be good. I'm David Wilcock, here with 3 of my closest fans and admirers. This is Wisdom Teachings, and I thank you for watching.